in Russia. The Frierdiker Rebbe left Russia in 1927. But he stayed in contact with Yidden in Russia. And of course, over time, it basically became, if you were a Yid in Russia and you were from, you were going to be connected to Lubavitch. And they were not all Lubavitchers. There were a lot of Elach Yidden who were Misnagdim and other Chassidim, Mamish Elach Yidden, who were Meis Nefesh Kiddush Hashem. There's a family in Lubavitch called Kaplan. They're all very smart. They're big Talmidei Chachamim. So one of the Kaplans told me a really upsetting story. Mamish upsetting story. I knew their father. I mean, the Yidden, they're older than I am. They must be in their 70s. Shmuel Kaplan, Nachum Kaplan, they must be in their mid-70s. I forgot their father. Moshe ben Yomen, I think his name was. Kaplan. His father was Yehuda Leib. He was a Litvisher. He was a Misnagid. He was the Rav of Kiev, and he was a very, very big Talmid Chacham. He was a very, very big Gaon. He was a very big Gaon. Very big Gaon. He was arrested the same day that they arrested the Rebbe's father, Reb Leivik. Reb Leivik was a Rav in Yekaterinburg, in Dnepropetrovsk. He was a Rav in Kiev, but they're both in the Ukraine. The day they arrested Reb Leivik, they arrested a bunch of Rabbanim in the Ukraine. They put him in jail. They tried him. They gave him all sentences and sent him off to their gullahs. This younger man, Harav Leibel Kaplan, I don't know how young he was, he couldn't have been too young, knew that Reb Leivik is not going to be able to do anything for himself. Reb Leivik could learn Torah, he could say Kabbalah, but he can't make a piece of bread. He doesn't know what to do. And he knew that Reb Leivik was going to starve. Now the end of the story was that the Rebbe and Chana joined Reb Leivik. She traveled from the Dnepropetrovsk, from Yekaterinburg to Chiloy. I don't know how to pronounce the word. He told me the correct pronunciation. I'm going to get that pronunciation right, but I know how to speak like a Yemenite Jew. And she joined him. And when she joined him, she made food for him. She took care of him. She made him ink so he could write Chidush Torah. But by himself, Reb Leivik was not in this world. And this label Kaplan knew this. So he was fashiked in a different city in Asia. Every Thursday night, or whatever it was, middle of the week, he was a prisoner. And he was a prisoner who was being watched. He would jump on a moving train that was going in the direction of Chiloy, where the Rebbe's father was. He'd jump off the moving train. He knew that Leivik had a porch. He was living in a foyer of a house. The accommodations were terrible. And he'd cook him food. He made him kugel. I don't know how, but he made him kugel. He made him some Shabbos, Jewish food. Every week he did this label Kaplan. And when the Rebbe and Chana came, she came in the middle of the week, and she sees that Leivik has kugel. And she didn't get it from the Bikur Cholim, you understand, in the hospital. Leivik did not have any way. So she says to Leivik, how do you have Jewish food? I mean, you get kugel. He says, every week a malach comes. Every week a malach comes and makes me Jewish food. Anyway, a couple of days later, Rebbe Tzachana is walking in the street and she sees a Rav. So she runs home and she tells her husband, I saw a Elach Yid in town. So when the guy came close to us, Leivik, this is the malach. This is the malach. When they came to America, she met the Kaplans. She said to Moshe ben Yomen, Machon, ich gedenk noch dem Tam von dem Taten Kugel. His father was not much of a cook. He was a god. He was a big lab. He said, I can still taste your father's kugel. The end of this label Kaplan, I'm telling you the story for this, was he was an Elach Yid. He wasn't a chassid, but he was a big chassid. You know what I'm saying? He was a real Jew. It was 1944, either 43 or 44, Tafshnal Tafshnhei. He was fashikt. It was the middle of the war. And who was paying attention to them? So he made a million Yom Kippur. He got together 10 Jews in the Soviet Union, and they davened. The KGB got wind of it. They pulled him out of the shul on Yom Kippur, and they beat him to death, kipshutei. They hit him till they killed him. Mamish. This was the Soviet Union. His son, who I remember, lived near Mias on Schenectady in Eastern Crown Heights. He would daven Shachris by the Rebbe Yom Kippur every year. He was the chazan for Shachris. And the story is, they killed him al Kiddush Hashem because he made a minyan. And this was a Yid who Pashat fed the Rebbe's father, and I'm guaranteed the Rebbe knew it. Anyway, these acts of Mesiras Nefesh don't say in halacha. These acts of Mesiras Nefesh are written on the heart of a Jew. You understand? They're written on the heart of a Jew. A Jew says, we're doing this. Why? Don't ask me why. We're doing this. And post facto, the Eibusher says, check. I'm with you. Chachafilu, halacha says, I don't know what to tell you. So this is a Hagdom. I'm so happy I had an opportunity to tell this story. It's so wonderful. But I want to tell you a second story. And I heard the story from Mendy Khan, and heard from his father Zalman Khan, heard from his father, with whom the story happened. The Rebbe left Russia. And he stayed in touch with Anash in Russia. I don't know how. Telegraph. There was all kinds of ways of communication. Leningrad, Petersburg, Lenin, where the Rebbe lived before he left, had an old Rav whose name was Katzenellenbogen. And you read the Igros Kodesh, it really gets you really upset. He was a Litvak, he was a Misnagid. And they convinced him that the Frierdiker Rebbe is his enemy. They made a hate, they created an animus between him and the Frierdiker Rebbe. And the Frierdiker Rebbe writes in every letter, he's a Gadol B'Yisrael, he's a Talmud Chacham, he's a Yerei Shamayim, he's an Erlich Yid. They've told him bad things about me. They made him, he was an old man, that he convinced him that he should not like me, but I love him and I respect him and I revere him. But he writes, but he doesn't understand the situation and he can't get sucked into the government. He was elderly. It's fascinating. This Katzenellenberg was a big Litvak, big Misnagid, and he fought with the Frierdiker Rebbe, and in every letter, the Frierdiker Rebbe writes about him, Gedelos and Nitzudas. Hilke Zaltzman told me that his father, Harav Avram Zaltzman, was a sheikhet. He became a sheikhet when the Frierdiker Rebbe was still in Russia. So when he comes to the Frierdiker Rebbe, tell the Rebbe that he's taking Kabbalah for Shechita, so the Frierdiker Rebbe says, from whom are you taking Kabbalah for Shechita? There were two Rabbanim in Leningrad. There was a Chassidish Rav, the Chassidish was Lazarov, Alzarov, who was also killed by Kaddish. His name was Shimon. And the Misnagdish Rav was Katzenellenberg. So Rabbi Zaltzman, Avram Zaltzman tells the Frierdiker Rebbe, of course I'm going to the Chassidish Rav. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said, why don't you go to the Litvish Rav? Why don't you go to Katzenellenberg and get some Kabbalah for Shechita? He says, Rebbe, he's a Misnagid. So the Frierdiker says, oh, but I was an Erlich Yid, he's a God-fearing Jew. The Frierdiker wanted to get smeared. Kabbalah, Dafka from a Litvak. Dafka with an Erlich Yid. He was older than Lazarov, I'm assuming. He says, Rebbe, I'm Misnagid. Rebbe says, oh, but I'm an Erlich Yid. So the Frierdiker wants to get Kabbalah from a Litvak. You have to understand how it works. If a Misnagid Shabbat Chacham into 770 wants to get smicha from Marash Yeshivas, they're going to torture him. They're going to give him a much harder test than they'll give you. But if you would go into a Misnagid Yeshiva and ask for smicha of their Rabban, they do the same thing. Every yeshiva has to give smicha to their own Talmidim. But if you're not their Talmud, they're not giving you smicha until you deserve it. So if a Chassidish Bacher wants to get a Kabbalah from Misnagdish Rav, he has to really know his stuff. So he tells the Frierdiker Rebbe, he's going to torture me in the Farher. He's going to make it impossible for me. I'm not going to pass. So the Rebbe says to him in Yiddish, Wirst du wissen, so you'll know. So he went to Katzenellenberg, and that's a big breifus. He went to Katzenellenberg, and he gave him the hardest test in the world, and he knew every question. The Rebbe wanted to get smicha and dafka from this Rav, because he was a gewaldige Yerei Shamayim. Bechal the Frierdiker Rebbe was colorblind, especially in those years. Are you a Erlich Yid? But he passed away. And the Rabbanos in Leningrad became vacated. That's how I understand the story. I may be pushing the envelope, but that's how I understand the story. So there was an election. And the Misnagdim put up a new candidate, and the Chassidim put up Lazarov, who had been there before, the Chassidish Rav. And all the Chassidim were screaming, if you vote for the Misnagdish candidate, they're going to do with you, like it says about the Koyanim, take you out of the Beis Hamikdash, and they're going to destroy it. And there was like, if you're going to vote, the famous quote was, if you're going to vote for the Misnagdish Rav, you're going to break a chair over your head. And out of the blue one day, a message comes from the Frierdiker Rebbe that all the Chassidim should vote for the Misnagdish candidate. And I can't remember his name. There was no election, there was chairs. I forgot his name, but the Frierdiker Rebbe had a committee of 5 that he worked with when he was in Russia, and 3 of them were Misnagdish Rabbanim. One was Harav Reuven Bengis, the other one was the Chazay Yecheskel, Rabbi Cheskel Abramsky, and the third was this Rav, I never remember his name. He was a big Talmud, they were big Goinim, they were big Talmidei Chachamim. They were Erlich Yidum, Mesiras Nefesh people, and I can't remember his name. I never remember his name, so forgive me, you have to put the name into the story. And the Lubavitchers were freaked out. The Rebbe is saying to vote, and Harav Lazarov can't find Lenin, he was a big Talmud Chacham also, and he was a big Yerushalayim also, but the Rebbe said, I want you to vote for him. So now the rumor was, if you vote for the Chassidish Rav, you get a chair in your head. That's what became this law. So there was no election. If the Chassidim are voting for the Misnagdim, there's no election. But the Chassidim couldn't understand, why would the Rebbe say to vote for a Litvish Rav? So they had to check him out. So they called in Chaikel Chanan. Chaikel Chanan was still a Bacher, he was an elder Bacher, and he was always on the business side. He was a Chassidish Yid. But he was a very, very capable, but he made lots of money in his life. He also lost lots of money in his life. He gave loans that he never got back. He was a special man. Heikel Chana was the true embodiment of a Chassidish Gvir. You know, he had a lot of money. He gave lots of stock, and he helped lots of people. He was a Chassidish Yid, but he was a businessman. So he looked like a businessman. Not Chas Shalom didn't have a beard, but the way he dressed and the way he carried himself. So they told him, go to Leningrad, come to this Rav, whose name I can't remember, and get yourself invited to stay in his house. And check him out. So he came to Leningrad and he knocked on the door and he said, listen, I'm a Frum Bacher. I can't eat by everybody. You know, if a person actually has Shabbos, can't eat in their house. Can I stay a few days? He says, yeah. So he moved in. That day, elder Yid comes to the Rav, to this Rav, crying moishlish. He's very upset. He said, Rebbe, I've been Frum my whole life. I was never Machal Shabbos. I was never Eichel Trefes. I was never Matal Chas Shalom even Tahara. But if I don't work Shabbos, they're going to kick me out of my apartment. I'm going to starve and I'm going to die. So this Rav, with such tenderness, with such love, sat down with this Yid, and he explained to him what means a De'eraisa, what means a Derabbanon, what means a Melach, what means a Shvus. And he showed him how he could go to work, and maybe even do his job, so that he shouldn't lose his life, and he shouldn't lose his manasa, and he shouldn't lose his house, and not be a Machal Shabbos. He talked him through every kula. He explained it to him, and he can't let it. You know, you don't need a Rav to say you're not allowed. I can do that too. You need a Rav in these kind of cases to know how you navigate in a way. So, you know, you're not going to be Machal, you're going to be even on some Shvusim, some Derabbanons, you're going to make certain leniencies, but you'll keep Shabbos. And Chaikel watches this. It was very impressive, very impressive. A Yid, a Rav, with so much care and concern that he found a way that this Yid walked away like he felt like $1 million. Okay, I'm still Frum, you know, I'm still Frum. A couple of days later, a Chassidish young man shows up, a Tomim. He comes into the Rav, he can let in, and he says to him, Rebbe, I have an apartment and have a job. But if I don't work Shabbos, I'm losing my apartment, I'm losing my job, I'm losing my life. And I worked it out. But I came to talk it over with the Rav. And he sits with this Rav and talks over the very same kulus about the Reises and the Rabbonans and Shvuses and B'diyeveds and the Chatchilis and Garmi and Groma and indirect action, Klachayads. He talked them through all the lamdas of how he's going to be able to go to work and he won't be on Chal Shabbos. And when he finishes, this Rav says to him, and I wish I could remember his name, I'm not giving you a heter for anything. Shumei for nisht. Shabbos is Shabbos, and now it's time of Shema, the time of Mesiras Nefesh. You're not getting a heter for me for one of these kulas. You want to find a heter, go to a different Rav. For me, I'm not allowing you any of this. And he was very passionate, and he kicked him out of his house, but he told him, forget about it. For me, you're not getting a heter.
Well, you can't pick and choose.
Anyway, the guy leaves the house, and Chaikel, this is exactly what he was waiting for, turned to him and said, I don't understand you. 2 days ago, a guy came and you told him all these atadim. So the Rebbe gets very excited, and he starts to scream in Russian, Kordetsky Korpus. And again, it's maybe the wrong words, but it's supposed to mean the private guard of the king. In Russia, there was the Tsar's own soldiers. They were trained to die. They were trained for Mesiras Nefesh. He says, a Yid has a shaila, and he needs a heter. Of course I'm going to give him a heter. But a Tomim? Temimim? Temimim? They were raised on Mesiras Nefesh. He was a Litvish enough. He wasn't a Tomim himself. For me, they're not getting no heter. So Chaikel came back to the Chassidim, and they understood exactly why the Rebbe Rashab said they're voting for the Besnagdische candidate. Because their head, he understood not just Yiddishkeit, not just the Lomdis. He did head the Nekudah of Mesiras Nefesh, which is very hard. Lubavitchers are trained, we're raised on that. We're raised on the point of sacrifice. But most Yidden are raised on the point of Shulchan Aruch, Lomdis. This Rav understood Mesiras Nefesh, and he said, I'll give a heter to a Yid. A Tomim? A Tomim? Shomei v'nisht. That's the story. And that's the story of Chanukah Rabbi Yisai. That's what happened. The Chashmei Noyim did a Mesiras Nefesh. If they would go to a Rav, the Rav would say, you're not allowed. And after the fact, the Eibusher says, no, endorsed. Check. Kosher.